Explosions, shouts, and gunfire reverberated up the shaft of the stairwell. Ryoko both felt and heard the tremendous commotion echoing closer and closer to her position, still hiding just inside the roof access door. She stood up and came to the railing on the small landing, aiming her large rifle out and down at the stairs below her, on as much of a depression as she could. More fear gripped her. The hem of her skirt still swaying slightly back and forth from her recent shift in position. The calamity below her was deafening. Quick single flashes of light, or small rapid burst of light, Ryoko spotted at random spots in the stairwell constantly moving. Then the muttered, angry and horrifying "Skibidi, Skibidi," could be heard en masse echoing up the stairwell. They're coming, Ryoko realized. She closed one eye and looked through the scope with the other, waiting for the gleam of white porcelain to come into her crosshair. Her finger held tight to the trigger. A gray blur came into view a few flights of stairs below. She prepared to fire, then she realized it was human. It was Lex. Lex turned back as Ryoko watched through her scope. He aimed his revolver and unloaded as Ryoko watched the shimmering white blur that was Kuro Silk's hair dart past, followed by the pink dab of color that was Mikaru. Lex flicked the chamber of his revolver out, expelling the spent rounds. He grabbed another moon clip and reloaded it as he took off running again, closing the chamber. The three, now 2 flights below Ryoko, looked up to see her standing there, her rifle trained on them. They stopped and paused. Ryoko removed the barrel from them and pointed it up. The group then finished the ascent up the last of the stairs. Kuro Silk and Mikaru bolted out the door onto the roof. Lex followed, turning to Ryoko. "They're right behind us," he shouted. He then passed Ryoko and darted out the door. Ryoko stood there for half a second, then dashed out the door as well. They slammed the door shut behind them. The group began to push and pile anything large they could scrounge up in front of the door. Broken loose air units, piping, etc. "That door opens inwards," Ryoko said, exposing the problem. The group stood, their weapons at the ready, as they heard the Skibidis slam into the door and continue to bash up against it. The overflow of the massive amount of toilets pushing against the door prevented them from being able to open it for the moment, as the toilets had backed themselves up. Relatively safe for the moment, the group took a breath. Mikaru ran over to Ryoko, hugging her and burying her head in her chest. "Miss Ryoko," came the muffled cries of Mikaru. Ryoko looked down at her, confused, her arms limp at her sides. She then slowly, with some hesitation, placed her left hand on top of Mikaru's head and gently rubbed it. "It's okay. You're safe for the moment," said Ryoko. Lex and Kuro Silk looked at her, confused as well. Ryoko lifted Mikaru by the shoulder off of her. Mikaru wiped her eyes and recomposed herself. "That's not going to hold eternally," said Ryoko. "Who are you two?" asked Ryoko. "Lex Gunther. GSG-9. Kuro Silk, Special Operator. Ryoko Kazumi, Special Operator as well." "What are you special operators? You're the second one I've come across," asked Lex. "They call us that, and officially we're part of the Special Task Force, but the reality is the toilet creature invasion happened so fast and was so devastating, the Japanese military just started grabbing anyone in the ranks that they though could do something or was willing to do something, and started to deploy them anywhere trying to hold the line. Most of the time we're just random soldiers fighting alone. Most of us are probably dead by now, never meeting another operator. They basically gave us a fancy name and sent us out on a suicide mission, like the kamikaze pilots of the war long ago. The only difference is we weren't ordered to die, they just expect it to happen," informed Ryoko. "What are you doing in Japan?" she prodded. "International Police and Security Conference." "Then this whole thing erupted," answered Lex. More pounding on the door. The group turned and braced, but the door held and they stood down again. "We have to get out of here and we can't go back that way," said Lex. "How'd you get up here?" he asked Ryoko. "Dropped off. Pick up is at dawn if there's anyone left or able to come back for me, and I assume others still out there," she replied with a sigh as she looked out over the city. The others looked out as well. Smoke plumed from buildings in the distance. Firelight, random massive explosions, and the sounds of destruction enveloped the senses of all of them.